Imagine this. You are standing in a silent stone corridor somewhere beneath the Egyptian desert. The air is old, not just dusty, old. The kind of air that has not moved in 3,000 years. Your torch shakes in your hand. On the wall, strange painted eyes stare back at you. At your feet, the sand is untouched. Ahead of you sits a sealed chamber packed with gold, ritual masks, carved statues, and the promise of becoming very rich very quickly. So naturally, you touch something, and that is how you die. Not dramatically, not instantly, not always with spikes flying out of the wall like some cheerful adventure movie. No, ancient tombs were often worse than that. More patient, more intelligent, less like a machine built to kill a body, and more like an environment built to destroy a human being piece by piece. Because if you break into a royal tomb, you are not just fighting stone. You are fighting architecture, paranoia, chemistry, darkness, bad air, unstable ground, hidden shafts, religious fear, and the possibility that one wrong move turns your glorious treasure hunt into a private burial. So, tonight, let us discuss a useful little question. How do you survive the deadliest ancient pyramid traps? The first answer is simple. You probably do not. Ancient Egyptian tombs were not merely graves. They were engineered boundaries between the living and the dead. And when powerful people believed the afterlife was real, protecting a burial chamber was not a decorative concern. It was a sacred obsession. A pharaoh's tomb had treasure, yes, but more importantly, it had identity, body, name, soul, order. To violate that chamber was to attack eternity itself. So the builders had incentives, and the robbers had incentives too, which is why tomb design slowly became a contest between those who wanted to hide the dead and those who wanted to profit from them. And that contest produced some deeply unpleasant results. Let us begin with the trap most people never see coming, the air. If you imagine ancient death traps, you probably picture blades, pits, and collapsing ceilings. But a sealed underground tomb can kill you long before anything mechanical happens. First, there is oxygen, or rather, the lack of it. A chamber sealed for centuries can contain stale, suffocating air with dangerously low oxygen and high levels of carbon dioxide. You step inside and feel lightheaded. Your breathing gets strange. Your thoughts slow down. Your judgment weakens. Which is a very unfortunate moment to be choosing between identical stone hallways underground. Then there are molds, fungi, and bacteria. Not every curse was supernatural. Sometimes a tomb made people sick because ancient sealed spaces can preserve biological hazards surprisingly well. Spores can irritate the lungs. Contaminants can trigger dangerous infections in already stressed bodies. A tiny cut, a weak immune system, bad air, panic, dehydration. Suddenly, the brave intruder begins dying in an extremely undignified and medically complicated way. And then there is dust. Thousands of years of rot, powdered stone, dried organic material, soot, and debris lifted into the lungs of a sweating explorer with poor ventilation and terrible luck. Even if the tomb does not kill you inside, it may decide to ruin you afterwards. So survival rule number 1, if the chamber smells wrong, feels wrong, or makes your breathing change, leave immediately. Unfortunately, greed is not famous for respecting ventilation concerns. Now, let us talk about the physical traps, or, in some cases, the things that may not have been traps in the theatrical sense, but were still more than capable of crushing, burying, or isolating an intruder forever. Ancient tomb passageways were often narrow, steep, and deliberately confusing. Some corridors led nowhere. Some were blocked with immense stone plugs. Some shafts dropped suddenly. Some rooms were hidden behind deceptive walls. Even without spring-loaded murder devices, the architecture itself could function as a weapon. Imagine forcing your way through a sealed entry, only to loosen unstable stone overhead. A slab shifts, then another. Now the passage behind you is blocked. Your only light source is failing. You are underground. You are alone. And every sound you make tells you that this monument is much heavier than your future. Rockfall is one of the oldest and most reliable killers in enclosed ancient spaces. You do not need a clever pressure plate when gravity is already on your side. Then there is the problem of false floors and hidden shafts. A section of flooring may be weaker than it looks. A burial shaft may be concealed beneath debris. One step, one crack, one sudden collapse, and you vanish into darkness with broken legs if you are lucky. If you are unlucky, nobody even knows where the screaming is coming from. And yes, there is the sand. The desert does not politely remain outside. Sand enters cracks, fills spaces, shifts weight, and turns excavation into a slow negotiation with collapse. Some chambers become death by geometry. You disturb one support point, and loose material pours where it was never meant to move. Now every exit is narrower. Every breath tastes of grit, and the tomb is not just a room anymore. It is becoming a throat. But the deadliest part of these spaces may not have been any single mechanism. It was disorientation. Underground darkness destroys confidence fast. Humans are not built to navigate silent stone mazes with failing fire, toxic air, and the suspicion that something expensive is hidden just one corridor deeper. That is how people make fatal decisions. They split up. They rush. They keep going after the first warning sign. They tell themselves they are close. That phrase, by the way, "we are close," has probably escorted an impressive number of humans directly into disaster. And even if the tomb itself did not kill you, the idea of tombs certainly killed people. Because grave robbing in ancient Egypt was not some romantic little side profession for charming rogues with lanterns. It was dangerous, illegal, and deeply desperate work. Robbers risked execution, mutilation, beatings, collapse, suffocation, and betrayal from the very people helping them carry stolen goods. The historical irony is almost adorable. The poor robbed the rich dead because the rich dead were buried with absurd wealth, and the state punished the living poor for touching wealth that would otherwise sit in darkness beside a corpse. Civilization is full of elegant moral arrangements like that. There are records suggesting that tomb robbery became widespread in times of economic instability. Officials, gay workers, guards, and laborers could all become part of the chain. And once a tomb was entered, the intruders faced not only the danger of the site itself, but also the danger of each other. Because if only one man can safely leave with the gold, the tomb has suddenly developed a very modern kind of trap. And of course, we cannot ignore the curse. Not because curses are scientifically persuasive, but because fear is. If you convince a man that a chamber is protected by divine punishment, every cough becomes a sign, every fever becomes a sentence, every death nearby becomes proof. Psychology can finish what architecture started. That is one of the great brutal genius moves of ancient burial culture. Build a physically dangerous place, wrap it in sacred warnings, seal it in darkness, and let the human mind collaborate with the stone. So, how do you survive the deadliest ancient pyramid traps? First, do not enter unstable enclosed ancient spaces without serious planning, proper equipment, and people who know exactly what they are doing. Second, Do not assume that the absence of visible traps means safety. And third, understand the most important rule of all. The tomb does not need to chase you. It only needs to wait. That is what makes ancient tomb design so terrifying. It is not simply violent. It is indifferent. The walls do not hate you. The shaft does not hate you. The stale air does not hate you. The stone plug, the hidden drop, the fungus, the darkness, the collapsing ceiling, none of these things are emotional. You entered their silence, and their silence was stronger than you. So, if you ever find yourself beneath a pyramid, staring at a sealed chamber full of treasure, asking whether you should take just one careful little step forward, here is the official survival advice. Do not touch it. Do not breathe too deeply. Do not trust the floor. Do not trust the ceiling. Do not trust the map. Do not trust your courage. And above all, do not assume that surviving the entrance means you have survived the tomb, because the ancient world did not need machine guns to defend its dead. It had darkness. It had stone. It had time. And time is very good at killing intruders. If you enjoy dark history, survival horror, and cheerful little nightmares, subscribe and come back for the next descent. Sleep well, explorer,